We are at 5 after 2, and I'm going to go ahead and start. Um, and whoever joins late has to catch up. So we'll do that just like they do in university. So my name is Alex Muñoz. I am the co-owner of a strategy consultancy by the name of CSR. CSR, we started in April of 2002. So this year makes 23 years since we've been in existence here in Atlanta, Georgia. My wife is my business partner as well as my life partner. And we've had the good fortune to be able to work together and build this business. So I hope that the folks that joined this presentation today had an opportunity to listen to my other presentation in March, where we talked about mission, vision, and values, which kind of most people tend to think, well, that's just kind of icing on the cake, or that's a nice marketing thing, but it's not really important. It actually is one of the most important things that you can do because it then sets the stage for the building of your business. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, I strongly suggest that you do. And I believe that the Resilient Immigrant website has all of the past talks cataloged, and they're available for review there. So, having said that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get going. And if you can't see my screen, please either unmute yourself or drop me a text so that I know and I can go in there and fix it. But I'm assuming that you can see the cover slide, which is legal and administrative essentials, setting up your business. So my goal is to make this presentation usable, interesting, and practical with live actual examples from our 23 years of business. Otherwise, you could just pull some stuff up online and kind of read or go to a library or do whatever people do when they don't want to hear from live people. Our um, um, what we're going to be covering are the following items: securing legal support, ownership and structure, financial and tax implications, naming and registering your business, practical financial and tax considerations, building your support network, checklist and recap, Q&A, and resources. It's important to understand that I am neither an attorney nor a CPA. So this is not official tax or legal advice. However, what it is it's uh, uh, experienced based from the School of Hard Knocks advice, and it's what we give to our clients when we're working with them. So um, it should be very practical for anyone who's seeking to start their business or fix their business. So the next slide, you know, why you need an attorney. And I tend to be reluctant in advising to our clients to bring on additional professional service providers. And that's what an attorney or a CPA or any of those kind of people tend to be, mostly because of how expensive they can be. And almost as important is that when you contract with somebody like that, they tend to be people who are very talented and very good at what they do, hopefully anyway, but they tend to look at the whole world through that filter. So for an attorney, everything is a legal problem. For a CPA, everything is going to be something that you need to do a budget on, or that you need to do a journal entry, or you need to set up some kind of a tax structure, etc. And though those things are very useful and very helpful, they shouldn't be the only filter upon which you examine your business. So um, uh, The attorney is going to help you prevent your legal pitfalls and protect your business. Uh, when you start with your business, that is a good point, a good entry point for someone to bring in and provide legal advice. The four items that are listed under critical documents are going to be things that you're just going to need to have them in order to be able to run your business. We'll go into the first two in some detail, um, and you'll might be the first two as well as the one of the second two as well. I know that one of them I didn't want to go into too much detail just because of the legal aspect of it, but these are all really important things that somebody that has a legal degree is going to be critical for you to be able to make happen. Um, and trying to save money by not doing some of these things is the wrong place to try and save money. We have had situations where um, uh, we had young companies that tried to, either do it by legal Zoom, or tried to go on the cheap and just kind of Google some things. And what that ended up setting up or creating for them was a situation where things that they didn't contemplate going wrong, because who wants to think about all the bad things that can happen when you and your partner are getting together to start a business? Those bad things happened, and so they weren't prepared legally for what it is that they needed to do. And that's what an attorney is going to be able to do for you. An attorney is designed, is wired, is built, is trained in law school to think about all of the worst case scenarios. And you want to have somebody that is going to, ask you the tough questions. Because sometimes the best way to start a business is to not start a business. It's to not have a business partner, or it's to go down a separate path than the one that you originally were planning on starting. Okay. So your critical documents, we looked at them here before. The articles of incorporation, your operating agreement. So, if you're going to be an LLC or if you're going to be a partnership, uh, how that's going to be governed, your partnership agreement, your corporate bylaws. Here we go into a little bit more detail on these. So, your articles of incorporation, we've put a working definition there. A legal document that establishes the existence of your corporation, and it's filed with the state. And what I mean by the state is, if you're in Georgia, it's going to be filed with the state of Georgia. If you're in Alabama, it's going to be filed with the state of Alabama. Your company, your business entity needs to be recognized as a legal organization, because otherwise it's going to be you or your partner that's doing these things, and that opens you up to a lot of legal risk, and it's problematic. So, for example, a tech startup officially registers with the state to legally operate, clearly outlining business name, purpose, and organizational structure. Um, uh, uh, Having this new organization be able to tell the state, here's how we're going to be working, here's what our name is, here's what it is that we're in business to do, and here's who the different people that are within the organization are. That just basically removes a lot of future problems if you don't have it. Let's say that for whatever reason your service or your product starts selling, very well. Well, who is it that you need to talk to within the government to make sure that you're going to be okay with taxes, or that you're going to be okay with getting permission to use that name? Otherwise, somebody's going to sweep in and they're going to cause problems for you. So very, very obvious, very basic things like that are what your articles of incorporation are going to help you do. your operating agreement. So it's an internal document that details your ownership, roles, profit distribution, and decision making processes within your LLC. And what LLC stands for is a limited liability company. So the example here is, let's say, you know, your wife and her sister decide that they want to open up a cafe, or if it's the other way around, your husband and his brother decide to open up a cafe, and you draft an agreement that specifies the responsibilities. It might be that one of the partners is going to be the one that is, let's say, the president, and the other one is going to be the chief executive officer. And each of those tend to have different responsibilities. A lot of times, the president tends to be more inwardly or operations focused. So that partner might be the one that is showing up every day to open up the cafe in the morning and shut it down at night. While the chief executive officer might be the one that's going out there and taking care of all of the legal paperwork, or is going and participating in business networking or whatever. I mean, there's no firm and hard rules, but it is important to make sure that it's clear who's doing what, so you don't end up in a situation where one partner says to the other, I thought you were going to be doing this. No, no, I thought you said it. That just creates confusion. Ownership percentages relates to, you know, who owns how much of the business. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next page. And then how profits and losses are shared. Hopefully you've started this business. Hopefully it's going to be wildly successful. And the problem that you have is how to figure out how you're going to spend all of this money that you're going to make. But what happens if you lose money? You know, who's going to cover those losses until you figure out a way to not lose any money? Um, those things are important to figure out beforehand. It's important to figure out, are you going to take the money that you're making, the profits, and are you going to reinvest them in your business, or are you going to save them and then every quarter make a payout to all the partners, or every month anything that's left over, are you and your partners going to all just put in your pockets? I mean, all of those things are really important to figure out. Again, I'll reference the other presentation that I did on mission, vision, and values. That many times will help you determine the way that you're choosing to put together your business. Um, so these two documents should be drafted by an attorney to ensure compliance with all of the applicable laws and regulations in your state. You're going to need these types of documents to get registered with the state, open a business bank account, obtain any necessary business licensing, uh, and any other types of things that the state government requires. Okay, which takes us then to the next ones, which the next two documents. And these two documents are applicable really only if you have more than one owner. So with a partnership agreement, this is going to be something that is put into play between business partners. And again, it defines roles, responsibilities, profit sharing, and terms for dispute resolution. A lot of people are like, oh, this is my brother or this is my best friend, and we're never going to have a problem. I can promise you, unless you're never going to do anything except just start the business and then never do anything with it, you're going to have problems, because we're humans and all humans have problems. So, the example here is co-founders of a consulting firm that clearly outline decision-making authority, equity distribution, and exit strategies to prevent conflicts. So what I'm referring to here has to do with, the whole idea behind, for example, if you're on a ship, if you're on a boat, how many boats have two captains? It's only one captain. It doesn't mean that that person is better than the other one. It just means that that's the person that's got the decision-making authority. Because imagine you've got two captains, the boat is drifting and it's going to hit a reef, or is gonna crash, and they're arguing back and forth. No, well, I think we should turn left. I think we should turn right. If you don't have somebody that can make that decision we're going to turn left. You're going to end up in a situation where that boat's going to crash. Um, what equity distribution talks to is a very important thing that a lot of people make mistakes on. They decide that they're going to start their business, and they and their partner, we're going to be 50-50. Again, we're sisters. We are just we were born from the our mother's womb at the same time. We're equal in everything in life. um, that begins to be problematic. Everyone loves 50-50, but it's a big mistake in terms of things like the tie that I just mentioned to you before. If you've got two captains and they both have equal authority and equal equity, well, who's the one that's going to break the tie? I mean, so we like to advise our clients, if you've got more than one partner, great. If you've got three partners, it's a third, a third, a third, or some distribution like that, and it ensures that you don't have that 50-50 deadlock. If you decide that you only want to have one partner, then it's best to have it be something where you break it out maybe 51%, 49%. That gives somebody the opportunity to be able to break a tie if need be. Um, uh, One thing that we also like to encourage our clients to think about when they're putting together business is um, to determine what amount of equity, how much of your company do you really need to make available to partners? And what I mean by that is that a lot of times people make the decision, well, I'm currently I own 100% of my company. I need help, so for me to get the kind of help I'm going to need, I need to either give or sell part of my company to somebody else. Well, we encourage people to think about that and really determine, is that the case? And what I mean by that is that different things motivate different people. So we've had a situation where a law firm owner had 100% owner of his law firm, and he wanted to start bringing on more senior people, and he was really trying to figure out, oh, how do I determine how to value the equity in the business, and how do I figure out how much? And I said, time out. When you're looking at this, talk to the person that you're interested in bringing on and see what they want. Different people are motivated by different things, and so in this case, this person that he wanted to bring on, they just wanted to be able to make a lot more money than they were currently making. He had them on a salaried basis. And so what he did was he made them be able to share in the profits of the business. And he was able to do that while keeping 100% of the equity. In other cases, someone is interested in going from being the the sole owner and the one that's doing all of the work to being able to share responsibility or even take a step back and become a silent partner. And in that case, finding someone who they're not so much interested in having, 50% or 33% of the ownership, they just want to be able to control and run the business. Well, in that case, again, depending on how you structure it, everybody's needs can be accomplished. Um, in that second bullet point, we discuss corporate bylaws, and those are internal rules that govern the management and operations of a corporation. And they typically address governance procedures, roles, and voting rules. So again, it talks to ways that you can make sure that everyone's role is defined. How often you as an organization need to formally meet because there's rules associated with that the government sets, and then how important decisions are made and recorded. You might think, oh, we're too small, we shouldn't have to worry about that. Well, you never know. And though it doesn't have to be really formal and structured, in most cases, you need to have a formal meeting once a year. You need to have somebody that takes minutes, and then things like, okay, well, the president and the CEO are going to be making this much money, and this is what, gets established. Those are things that, you need to have written down, if no other reason. If somebody says, well, how come you're paying yourself so much? Well, If you recall, we had this meeting at the beginning of the year. I know some of these things you shake your head, but there's a lot of wisdom behind these things. So let's look a little bit now, more now at ownership and structure. So here, considering under determining ownership, considering the financial contributions, roles and responsibilities and the skills of each potential owner is important. If there's two partners, again, for example, our example, and you've got one that tends to be just really focused on operations, maybe they're quieter and they're not interested in being as externally facing. Well, making sure that that person has an opportunity to focus on that which is the best and highest use of their skills is really important. Likewise, somebody who's the opposite of that, you want them to be, for example, out there and really driving sales. um, Clearly documenting the ownership percentages to prevent future conflicts. We've alluded to that. And then regularly reviewing and updating your agreements as your business evolves. We like for our clients, we with most of them, we've done a strategic plan beforehand, and then what we do is we on an annual basis will refresh that strategic plan. We like to use that annual refresh as the time to regularly review and update the agreements as their business evolves and grows. Um, this is just super important. It reminds me of a time where we had a law firm client. They'd been in business for about 30 years. And when they first started, they were I'm sorry, four partners. They added two later on, but they started with four. And what these four did, and you're going to be shocked when I tell you this, but it's more. This happens more commonly than you'd be willing to believe. These four attorneys that were coming together to start their own law firm, they never put together any of this stuff. They didn't put together a partnership agreement. They didn't determine an operating agreement. None of those things. And it was because they were such good friends that they couldn't imagine that they were ever going to have a problem that was going to require them having to refer back to any kind of documents. Well, fast forward 30 years, and you have one of the partners who was a lady, had breast cancer, had recovered from the breast cancer, and had decided, um, I want to go off and do something different in life. Who knows if the breast cancer is going to return? I want to be able to spend time with my family. Well, great. All of her partners were in support of that. However, the law firm had grown to be about 11 million in size in annual revenues, and her very reasonable question was, I'm getting ready to leave, and I'd like to have a share of that 11 million, be paid to me. Well, there was none of that ever documented down, and that really created some conflict. So, you know, the conflict can exist when there's problems, and it can exist even when you're really successful. Resist that urge to be 50-50 partners. That's the biggest lesson here. Um, Under common business structures, we list four different types here: sole proprietorship, that's when it's just you; a partnership, that could be you and one or I guess potentially other people as well; a limited liability company, that's maybe you've heard that term LLC a lot, and it removes the liability from the individual and it puts it into a company; and then there's a corporation with subtypes. Um, Consulting with a CPA and an attorney to determine which of these is best for you is what we recommend to people. And the reason why is that, because everyone is an individual and different, uh, each individual may have a different reason for wanting or needing different things. And talking to those people who are experts in their fields are going to enable them to provide you with the best option that fits your own specific situation. So earlier I talked about, hey, be careful about going to these experts, when it's not exactly needed. This is one of those times where you definitely do want to have them involved. Okay, so let's look at the next page. And you know, when you look at determining ownership, you need to be thinking about um, who it is that's bringing what to the table. So that first bullet point where it says consider who brings capital, expertise, and time. Well, here's the thing. Um, uh, there's an expression that goes, I operate by the golden rule. And, the golden rule is something where the original expression of it is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. People have made a joke of that and say the golden rule is he who has the gold rules. And, it's kind of an ironic statement, but there's some truth in it, in that, you know, um, you're going to be able to take your business and have it be able to grow faster, uh, be larger sooner, etc., if you are a well funded venture. I mean, that's just the name of the game, uh, rightly or wrongly. And so that factor of capital is an important one. Who's going to be funding the venture? That person that funds the venture many times is going to be an important decision maker in the organization, even if they end up being a silent partner. Likewise, a person that has expertise. So think of a technology company, and you've got somebody who was working at a university, came up with a great idea, and then wants to start their own company to be able to capitalize on that idea. You know, though being funded by somebody who's bringing capital that could, pay for office space, that could, or not. I mean, there's a lot of virtual stuff these days, but let's go with office space. Um, that could fund hiring of additional employees. That could put together a marketing spend. All those things are important, but without that person that has the expertise in that particular thing, it's going to be very difficult for that business to take off, because there's there's no there's no central idea behind it. Likewise, let's look at something very basic. I mean, let's say um, somebody's grandmother had a great food recipe. So it could be, in my case, that was one of the first things that we worked on when we started the business 23 years ago, was a company that made tamales. And tamales are, boy, if you do them well, you have a line of people out the door that want the food. If you don't do them well, you're going to end up with a lot of tamales on your hands because nobody's going to want to buy them. So, making sure that you have the right people on board that know how to make tamales, in this case, that know how to source the ingredients, etc., is going to be really important. And then the time. You know, a lot of people are trying to do what they refer to as side hustles these days, where they've got a full-time job, and that's what kind of brings in the money so that they can pay for place to live, food to eat, a car, etc. But there's going to be people that, while they're doing that, instead of when they're done with work, kicking back and relaxing or whatever, they've got a part-time job. And that part-time job is putting together this business. And it's their dream and it's their baby. And they at some point want to be able to build this out so that they can go off and quit their full-time job and do this full-time. Having people that are able to dedicate that time is an important aspect of this, and it plays into that ownership. Maybe they don't have money, maybe they don't have the expertise, but they want to put something that they refer to as sweat equity. And what sweat equity refers to is, hey, I don't have anything of value except for myself to put into it, and as a result of my being willing to spend time, maybe I'm the one that is going to the festivals on the weekends to sell the tamales, or maybe I'm going and I'm showing up at Costco, or at a supermarket, and I'm running one of those booths, and I'm cutting up the tamales and I'm putting it in people's mouths. I mean, somebody's got to do that, right? um, that's an example of the timepiece. And then we've kind of touched on this already on the second bullet point: clearly defining how decisions are made and disputes are resolved. If you don't get this down and well understood at the beginning, the bigger and more complicated your organization becomes over time, because ideally you're successful and you're starting to grow and you're starting to really, having more people on board and more important decisions to make. Well, if you don't have these things figured out beforehand, you're going to run into a situation where you have to keep stopping and figuring these things out. So, you know, the financial and tax implications are important. You're going to again want to take into account how your business structure is going to affect your tax liability. A CPA can guide you through this decision process. There's some organizations that, their goal is, for example, to minimize the profit that they make. Why? Because they're going to be taxed on their profits. So in December, they're trying to spend down as much as possible all the profit they've made during the year. They're buying equipment, they're paying bonuses, etc., so that when they end the year, they're ending it in a way that the tax that they face is minimized. All of that is something that you should work with your tax planner and your legal and tax counsel. Something really important here to consider on this next bullet point has to do with what we refer to as financial management best practices. As tempting as it is to just, have everything be put together and combined, keeping separate business and personal accounts is important. That's a checking account, credit cards, all of that stuff should be separate. When you do that, you then avoid a situation where um, you can't answer to the Internal Revenue Service how much of the money in your accounts are yours and how much is the business. Um, some best practices to keep in mind here is to always keep these separate. Um, as I mentioned, bank loan and credit should all be separate. We had a client once that a medical practice, and they had one of their offices was in an office condo. So think of, kind of a business park, and the different businesses in there were in condominiums, and they had decided to purchase this condominium instead of rent it. Well, the business purchased it, which that's not the business that they're in. The business they were in was to be doctors, and so. What we advise our clients is if you're going to be buying any big asset like that, do it separately, create a separate organization, and then have that separate organization lease or rent that asset back to the business, and have each one be separate so you avoid these kinds of situations. Another pitfall to avoid is getting behind in your bookkeeping. Most entrepreneurs don't love the details of accurate bookkeeping, and you can contract an individual or a company to do your bookkeeping on a regular basis and then meet with them once a month. So you kind of delegate that, you outsource it to somebody who's an expert at it, and they can charge you, a lot less than it would if you were to hire somebody full time or if you tried to figure it out yourself. Paying a bookkeeper up front is less stressful and costly than having to pay someone to try to reconstruct your books and reconcile accounts after years or months of not updating them. Not to mention the legal risk that you open yourself up to by not having up to date and records that prevent you from knowing if you actually even have a problem, which would be the worst case scenario there. Next, we talk about naming and registering your business. This is a big deal, and let me give you an example that you may or may not have heard of, but it's kind of a big business. And here I'm gonna stop sharing this, and I'm gonna share something else. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, so it's 1975, and there is um, a a company in Spain that decides that they want to sell uh, clothing and shoes, and they decide that they're going to name it after a popular movie at the time called Zorba the Greek. and they're about to start it when, lo and behold, they discover that there is another store that also had the same idea, and they end up not being able to do that because um, they were going to be in conflict with that store. So what they ended up doing, because they had already bought a lot of the letters for the sign, they went and they put together a different name, and that name is Zara. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but Zara is a big um, uh, uh, actually women, men, and children clothing store that is now celebrating their 50th birthday. But if they looked into it beforehand, who knows, what the name of their store would have been. So anyway, coming back to our presentation here, um, let me share that back again. Make sure that you do the research and are looking into, and if you can't see that, please just drop me a chat so I can fix it. You know, your business name is going to affect your marketing, your branding, and your legal registration. It's important to consider trademarks to protect your brand identity. Maybe not initially, unless it's something that's really unique, but there are important things to consider. So, as you choose your business name, you'll want to consider your marketing as well as the availability of web URLs. Www dot whatever, right? Ours, it's expertiseinresults.com, right? So you need to make sure that you're taking that into consideration, and you can check out name availability on sites such as godaddy.com. Before you make your final decision, consult your state website to ensure that there isn't another business in your state using the name, like our friends at Zara did, after they were going to use Zorba. The resource page at the end of this presentation contains links to help you do this, and as well as many other resources. And then registration essentials. Choose and check your business name availability on your state's website, like I just mentioned. Register your business with local and state authorities. Depending on your state, it's likely that you can perform the actual company registration yourself if you want to save some money. We've done this ourselves for our 23-year existence. Attorneys will often charge 10 times the cost of registration in order to complete the process on the website. I mean, literally, it's like $25 or something like that, and they'll charge $250. Most states have a user-friendly process to follow. Each year after your initial registration, you're gonna need to complete the annual registration renewal, and that process literally takes less than 5 minutes and basically just asks you to reconfirm what the state has on file. Okay, so as it refers to the practical kind of things that you need to do, to run a business, you have to apply for an employer identification number, and that's referred to as an EIN. You need to be able to open up a business bank account and a business credit card account. You need to be doing regular financial reviews with an accountant or with your bookkeeper, basically somebody that's keeping track of what your financials are. And then you need to be keeping track of those business expenses that are going to be deductible. And what deductible business expenses are is they're very convenient. One of the benefits of having your own business, they can be things like part of your house. It can be a car that you're using for to transact your business affairs. Those are things that you can then deduct from your the taxes that you own and that you owe, and can be very favorable for you. Um, Next, I wanted to share with you the importance of building your support network. Um, and this is the last slide here that we're going to be covering. And, we've got it broken out by expert advisors and community engagement. So, you know, with your expert advisors, again, having an attorney that is your go-to person for all things legal is something that you actually can, in some cases, do without having to spend any money. Think of it in terms of where um, you've got your doctor who might be your general practitioner, or you've got somebody who's building a building for you, and they're your uh, your general contractor. Those people aren't going to be the ones that are doing all aspects of either building your house or looking at every single part of your body. But if you go to your general practitioner and you go, hey, my ears are hurting a lot, they're going to look, they're going to see if it's something that they can do. And if it's not, they're going to send you to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. If you've got a general contractor who's working on your house and you tell them, hey, I want to put in a swimming pool, they're probably not going to be the ones that do it, but they know somebody who's going to do an excellent job at putting in that swimming pool. Likewise, that's how it is with some of these folks like attorneys or accountants. They're going to be able to tell you those things that they can do for you, and those that they've got good connections and contacts that they'll recommend, be the ones that come in and do that for you. Consultants are exactly what they are. They're specialists, and many can come and go as the specific need is addressed. So, somebody that, for example, you bring in because you want them to put together a marketing plan for you. Well, you know, many times they come in, they put together the marketing plan, and then they leave, or they recommend somebody to implement the marketing plan for you. As it relates um, to accountants, those folks are ideally going to be with you for the long haul. Again, like your attorney that's acting in that general counsel role. And with the accountant, it's particularly important because there could be things that happen, at some point in the company's history that then time passes, and you want to make sure that somebody besides you remembers why it is that things were done or what things were done so that they can be explained if at some point you get audited. Mentors and business networks as valuable resources. I mean, in addition to being able to talk to people, ask for advice, and be able to offer advice to others yourself, these folks also kind of give you colleagues, and it's a lonely thing when you're running and owning your own business. It's lonely, and being able to have people that you can turn to, even if they're not part of your business, but they're going through a lot of the same things, that enables you to kind of kill two birds with one stone, and being able to not only have expert advice, but in some cases, friends. So, um, overall, with both of these, both the trusted advisors and the business networks, it's a good idea by and large to think of them as when you're buying shoes for your children. The shoes are going to work for a period of time. As your kids' feet grow, you're going to end up needing to eventually swap out those shoes that are too tight and get ones that are a better fit for where they are in their development. Um, Also, one other point on expert advisors: they don't necessarily have to be subject matter experts in your industry. I mean, it's great and it can be really helpful, but if they're really sharp, if they're really smart, a lot of times not having them be subject matter experts can sometimes be even better because they're able to look at things in a different way and give you even better advice. Finally, as it relates to community engagement, um, engaging with local chambers of commerce and business groups, that's just a good idea in terms of being able to do networking, find out what's going on in the marketplace. We call that market intelligence. Again, being able to develop relationships with colleagues. Those are all really important. As it relates to getting strong business relationships for long-term support. I value, and I just turned 60 this month. I value being able to talk with people that are more wise than I am, so that I can kind of hear from them, their thoughts, folks that have been around 10, 20, or 30 years. more than I have, believe it or not. They're still out there, they're still working, and they can give good insights on the ups and downs of the life of the business. So, for example, this crazy stuff that's going on with the tariffs and, you know, or inflation, or just all of these different things that, because of how kind of stable things have been for the last couple of decades as it relates to inflation or as it relates to different things. Talking to folks that have experienced the things that we're going through now is useful. So here's your checklist. And again, I believe that the folks at Resilient Immigrant have this stuff on their website. So if you're not able to capture all of this as I'm going through it, I'm pretty sure that they'll have it on their website. Make sure you get yourself a good, reputable business attorney. Make sure that you've defined clearly what your business ownership structure is going to be. Get your business legally registered so that it's not all falling on you as an individual. Get an EIN, employer identification number from the IRS. Get yourself a business bank account open. Make sure that from the beginning you're implementing strong financial management practices, and regularly consult with financial and legal experts, even if it's quarterly or monthly or whatever. But make sure that you're not going off track on some of these important things. Here's the resource page, and I'm actually going to leave this up as I open it up to any kind of Q&A.